So how did great photography go from being this? A photograph from over 100 years ago of a speeding car. It's blurry, indistinct, it lacks any real detail, and of course it is super distorted. To this. An award-winning photograph from 2023 of two noble birds, beautifully lit, perched on this branch with stunning detail. And it's almost hyper vivid. Those old photographs, they have a certain charm to them. They've got a nostalgic element. And of course, they are symbols of their time. But they feel worlds away from what we would now consider to be a great photograph. So how did great photography go from this to this? How's it? Welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Alex, and I create videos about the joy and the passion in photography. Now, over the last 30 odd years or so that I've been a photographer, I've witnessed massive changes in photography. From cutting my teeth as a student on film, going and learning digital, and of course now we have the rise of AI. And today I wanted to look at the journey of the aesthetic in photography. How what we consider to be a great photograph has changed over the years, and why those awesome photographs from the past that are technically imperfect still have a place to shape the way that we think about photography in the modern era. So this idea about, what constitutes a good photograph, is pretty tricky, especially for somebody who's getting started. And I remember as a young student, I had this book, it's the history of photography. And in here, there is a photograph by a chap called Edward Steichen, who's a massively famous photographer, whose career basically is like a thumbnail version of the history of photography. And this particular image is of Rodin posing with his sculpture, The Thinker. And to be like, this is an amazing, great photograph. I'm like, why? This picture is out of focus. There's no shadow detail. Apparently, I thought shadow detail was supposed to be a very important thing in photographs. Why is it good? It's nothing like what I see in all the manuals about how to take a great photo. Of course, I was forgetting that those early photographers were working under constraints. They are pioneers, and pioneers by their very nature work at the edges of things. It's easy to think that they were bemoaning the lack of quality. If only things could be sharp, and if only I could capture something on the fly in a thousandth of a second, then it would be so much perfect. But I don't think they were. I think they were just joyful about the sheer alchemy of capturing a photograph, not worrying about this technical perfection that today a lot of people seem to be obsessed with. In my own journey in photography, I was enamored with the sheer beauty of just loading up some film, taking a photograph, going into the darkroom, and hey, like magic, I have a picture emerge. I wasn't concerned about sharpness. I wasn't concerned about composition. I was just enthralled with that photograph that I'd actually made. But because at its heart, photography is a technical process, I ended up overly concerned about the technical side of things. And once I'd got the basics down, I ran into a problem that my images weren't quite as technically proficient as I wanted them to be. And photography back in the day came up with a neat solution to this problem. This is the Oxford Companion to the Photograph. And the solution to these technical imperfections can be found in here. There is a page with the heading Pictorialism. And pictorialism is a movement that sprung up out of the arts and crafts vibe that was prevalent at the time, where everything was all about, really embracing the handmade nature of things. Well, I suppose today we might call an artisanal photograph. Because all of a sudden, there was a bunch of people running around with their own cameras. Kodak had just released, all their new point and shoot things where you just press the button and we do the rest. And it was increasingly sort of industrializing and mechanizing the process of photography. So these guys, who were embracing pictorialism were starting to say things like, it's photography whose intentions and expressions are deriving from fine art. They're saying that photographic art should imitate the conventions of academic painting. All of a sudden, all those technical flaws became an asset. The long exposures, the blurriness, the indistinct features, they lend themselves really nicely to this artsy-fartsy kind of way of looking at the world. And that was appealing to me as well. If I can't make something technically proficient, I'm going to start hiding it with lots of filters and things like that. And you see this even today. The process is even easier because we have the ability at touches of buttons and filters and stuff to hide and mask the things in our photographs that might be considered to be imperfections. Edward Steichen, and his name's going to pop up a lot in this video, super famous photographer, and we'd already seen his picture of Rodin, but he started off, pictorialism. It was very much up his street. You see, his photographs are some of the finest examples of pictorialism, but like myself, starting to have changes in the way that I see the world, Steichen also did a change and laid the seeds for the foundation of what we see today now, and this obsession with perfection in photography. We're going to go back to the book again now. It's a really cool book. It's quite heavy though, right? And straight photography. Edward Steichen and many other people, after the First World War, they embraced not the pictorialist aspect of things, of trying to make an idealized, ethereal world, but leaning into those advances that photographic manufacturers have given everybody, faster shutter speeds, smaller cameras, better lenses, better film. So straight photography, as laid out here in the Book of Words, is defined by higher contrast, sharper focus, and one that you hear quite often attached to get it right in camera, which is an aversion to cropping. So we have photographers like Edward Steichen who are embracing this ethos of straight photography, and they are beginning to work for magazines like Vogue, Vanity Fair, and starting what we now know as fashion photography, showing images to the wider general public of what they consider to be good photography. And in doing so, planting that idea in the general public's mind that a good photograph is one that is sharp, that has, detail in it, isn't cropped. Now, in my own case, I'm sitting there, I want things to be perfect, and I'm making smaller images, and rather happily, along comes digital. So I remember it like it was yesterday, scanning that very first negative. It was a portrait, we brought it up on the screen, and what did we do? Hey, look, we sharpened it using that little button called Unsharp Mask. We hadn't explored its creative possibilities. We had only seen digital as a way of fixing an imperfection in our photographs. And that's because all those images that started off with those seeds that people like Steichen had sown had blossomed into the fruits of perfection in all of the photographs that we had ever seen in the media around us. It's only natural that we mimicked what we saw. And you see this today in photography. People see award-winning photographs that are technically sharp and vivid, like those birds, and they think that is what they should achieve. But there is a movement starting, much like the pictorialist movement was a pushback to that mechanical process of photography, of embracing the aesthetic of the art movement, of that arts and crafts sort of vibe where everything was handmade. We're seeing this with film, the imperfections of film, its alchemy, that magic the tactile nature of it is starting to come in again. Even in my own photography, I have moved across many aspects, and with the rise of AI, I've kind of gone, well, what can we do there? What's going on? But I don't want to pursue AI because that is a path that right now doesn't interest me. It's digital. It's something that became mass produced. I want to go back to the aesthetic of something that is artisanal. For one of better, film photography. Somebody the other day on the channel said, hey, Alex, just get over yourself. You are a film photographer. Embrace it and accept it. Fortunately, in photography, we now live in a world where you can take images of whatever it is that you want in any sort of way that you want. The question of whether an image is good or if it's bad, ultimately, I don't think really matters. So long as you enjoy the process of taking the picture. In Edward Steichen's career, he started off as a pictorialist. He pushed photography through, going through straight photography, laying the foundation of, magazine fashion photography. And at the end of his life, he got simple joy from just taking a photograph of a tree near his house. I would encourage you to follow his example and just not get hung up about what constitutes good or great photography, but just enjoy the simple process, that alchemy of creating images. Edward Steichen is a fascinating photographer. We've only just scratched the surface with him. If you want to know more, check out this video over here. Thank you ever so much for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'll see you again soon.